Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Danielle. Thank you so much for tuning in to my instant reactions from this crazy weekend of college football. Probably, honestly, the craziest weekend we've had. It's a Saturday night, 8:22 p.m. It's been a hectic day, to say the least. I actually looked at my boyfriend like 20 minutes ago when the Alabama game was almost over. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. Like, after I record, let's go to bed and stuff. And he looked at me and he was like, it's 7:30. And I was like, oh my gosh. But my mom's out of town this week, so I'm on dog walking duty. I have 5 huskies. If you guys didn't know, I feel like it's kind of relevant. But, you know, get to know me a little. We have 5 huskies, and one of them this week actually got spayed. She's a puppy. She's on my lap right now. I'm sitting on my couch. She's knocked out still from sedation, and she's a little traumatized. You know, most traumatizing things that ever happened to her. So taking care of her all day, watched so much football. Oh, such a good day of football, guys. So fun. But crazy week, but I'm exhausted. We're going to get through this. We're going to power through this. I'm so excited to talk about all the games today. So, I don't know if it was a day of upsets per se, but a lot of close games today. Games I wasn't expecting. The Auburn-Arkansas game ended in controversy. We have the that is a tongue twister. We have the Red River rivalry, which 4 overtimes, my gosh, that was tight. I kept waiting to go to the Georgia-Tennessee game, and I was like, it keeps going. The Georgia-Tennessee game was exciting. The Alabama-Ole Miss game, did anyone expect that to be the game of the night and not Clemson-Miami? And Miami kind of laid an egg tonight, not going to lie. But we will get all into that today. But let's get started with probably the big game of the day, which was Oklahoma-Texas. 22 Texas, number 22, University of Texas at Austin, met the now unranked Oklahoma Sooners in the annual Red River matchup. This is their biggest rivals by far. If you know anyone that goes to any of these schools, you know this is the game of the year for them no matter what. My former tennis coach went to Oklahoma, and let's just say this is a big game for him. I have friends that go to UT, and they literally will block out 2 weeks of homework. Like, their teachers didn't assign them homework this weekend because they wanted to watch this game. The score was 53-48 OU in 4 overtimes. This was a game. Let me tell you, this was a game, people. The annual Red River Showdown in the Cotton Bowl match between 22 Texas, obviously, and now the unranked Sooners was a must-win for both teams, as neither the Longhorns nor the Sooners could afford to get too far behind in the Big 12 championship race and contend for a serious bowl. By now, many expect that the Sooners are out of bowl contention. However, after today, they could swing back in. Meanwhile, the Longhorns were trying to make a statement win today with Sam Ehlinger. I mean, by the third quarter, guys, I don't know how many of you actually watched this game. By the third quarter, I thought it was over. I believe that the score was 31-17 Oklahoma. It was tied at halftime. And I was kind of like, I was a little upset because I was just like, I was expecting a more exciting game. And then, nope, Sam Ehlinger came back in full force. One of my Heisman favorites, probably my Heisman favorite of the season besides Trevor Lawrence. But honestly, is Trevor Lawrence too obvious of a pick for the Heisman? Sam Ehlinger is kind of like do you actually know college football kind of pick? But that's for when you're at a bar with guys post-COVID, of course, people. Don't go to bars right now. Wear your masks. Stay safe. And have you guys seen that meme where it's a guy whispering to a girl about sports and she's like, oh, well, yeah, I don't know how to describe a meme, but that's what this is the concept. Sam Ehlinger is probably my favorite quarterback in college football right now. Is that bad to say? He's just such a dual threat quarterback. He had 5 total touchdowns. We'll get to the box score in a second, but he had 5 total touchdowns absolutely dominant, brought Texas back towards the end. 17 seconds left, tied up the game, went into 4 overtimes, back and forth, and then Oklahoma held them off for probably the biggest one of the season for the Sooners, definitely most needed. Now both teams are 2-2 and looking that they can still contend for the Big 12 championships. Iowa State did win today. But big day. Let's go over the box score. So for passing, Sam Ehlinger went 30-53, 287 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Spencer Rattler on the Sooner side had 209 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Both quarterbacks played pretty well today. Rattler was pulled, however, in the second quarter for a little bit because of his interception, but he was brought back in the second half. Ehlinger added 23 carries for 112 yards and 4 touchdowns. We had 6 total touchdowns, people, as the leading rusher for the Longhorns as well. And TJ Pledger for Sooners had 131 yards and 2 touchdowns. Offense day today, guys. If you're taking anything away from this, it was an offensive day for everyone in college football. Not really any defensive matchups today. Let me put it that way. There were definitely a few momentum swings towards the end. Oklahoma's offense kind of went stagnant in the fourth quarter, I guess you could say. Turnovers, penalties, fumbles. Rattler overcame his worst 30 minutes of football in his young career. Like I said, he was pulled in the second half. They made a switch to Tanner Mordiacci by the start of the second half, though. Rattler was back on the field. Oklahoma also got a quarterback, Sam Ehlinger, like I said, for a lot of the second straight year, notching 6 sacks and 7 QB hurries. Both teams exchanged touchdowns in the first 2 overtimes, but a pair of missed field goals in the third overtime kept the game going. Rattler then hit Drake Stoops for a 25-yard touchdown in the fourth quarter, and Trey Brown intercepted Ehlinger's pass on the next possession to give the team a win. Oklahoma now avoided going 0-3 in the Big 12, which happened last in 1998, and Texas has now lost 5 straight of its last 6 against the Sooners. Oklahoma definitely won by running the ball as well, which is an important note to make. And the Sooners didn't really perform well in the fourth quarter, which is kind of big. You'll note that in their last 3 games they've played, 2 last of the 2 which were losses against Kansas State and Kansas State, their defense and their offense really sputtered and became stagnant in the fourth quarter, which resulted in 2 losses. And today, they were lucky that Texas had to come from behind to win, and they weren't tied because Texas's offense was on a run. And obviously, a huge part of this was that Spencer Rattler was the dominant ball carrier as well for the Longhorns, not just the passer. And so they need to find a better running game, but great performance by both teams. Danielle Jeremiah of NFL Network tweeted out that this was the best bad game he's ever seen, and I kind of have to agree. It was very sloppy, very messy. What else would you expect from a classic rivalry game, though, with both teams' seasons basically on the line? Next up, we got, I would say this is the biggest upset of the day. I don't know if it's even an upset because both teams were ranked. But obviously one team was ranked way higher, and it was Florida, number 4 Florida, versus number 1 Texas A&M. Obviously, after Texas A&M got demolished, to say nicely, against Alabama last week at home, they were looking for revenge. And fun fact, Kyle Trask of Florida was named after Kyle Field. I have ESPN on the background right now, guys. A little sneak peek. I got a nice candle going as well. I've had a lot of coffee tonight. I'm still feeling it, but it's okay. I got my dog in my lap. But anyways, I have the game on in the background right now, but fun fact, he was named after Kyle Field, the home of the 12th man. But the Aggies, who were ranked number 21 after getting torched a week ago by Alabama, welcomed number 4 Florida to Kyle Field, and they pulled off a 41-38 upset victory after Kellen Mond hit the unknown wide receiver Caleb Chapman for a 51-yard bomb shy the score at 38-38 with 4:30 to play. The A&M defense forced its first turnover of the day, stripping Florida running back Malik Davis to get the ball near midfield. This was definitely the first signature win in the Jimbo Fisher era at Texas A&M University, or TAMU. Did anyone watch Friday Night Lights, by the way, when Connie Britton's character would be like, TAMU? That was so, and I'm so sorry, Texas A&M fans, if you're listening. That just reminded me of that. That's always what I think of when I think of Texas A&M, but let's go over the stats. So we have Kyle Trask. He went 23 of 32 for 312 yards and 4 touchdowns on the Texas A&M side. We have Kellen Mond, who went 25 of 35, 338 yards and 3 touchdowns. Wright added 31 yards and 1 touchdown for the Gators, while Spiller added 174 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground for the Aggies. In the air, we have Tony, not the Kyle to Kyle connection that led us today, with 92 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then Caleb Chapman, like I said, a pretty unknown, not well-known wide receiver. He had 151 yards and 2 touchdowns. Chapman caught just 6 passes for 52 yards in 15 career games entering Saturday. In this one, he caught 9 passes for 151 yards and 2 scores, like I said as well. The Kyle connection was not very strong today. It was back and forth A&M had a 31-28 lead with 12:35 to go, but Kyle Trask, one of the Heisman favorites for this season and probably considered, besides, I would say, Mac Jones and KJ Costello, probably one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. Again, this was definitely Jimbo Fisher's big game. This is a third year for A&M under Fisher. They gave him a 10-year, $75 million guaranteed contract. He had just one win over a ranked SEC opponent, and that was against the famous 7 overtime game against LSU a few years ago. Fisher does have the reputation as an offensive-minded coach, but that had yet to materialize in College Station until today. And that was definitely the big game. It'll be interesting to see how far Florida falls. It'll be interesting because obviously Alabama won today, but it wasn't as big of a sweep as people thought it was. And I think A&M showed a fight. They'll probably move up in the rankings, considering Virginia Tech lost, which we'll get into in a second. But that was probably the biggest upset of the day, I want to say. And if there's anything we learned, it's that college football is unpredictable. And today felt like a day of upsets. You know, I kind of woke up, a little pep in my step, I guess. And I was like, oh, today's going to be a good day of upsets in college football. And next up, we have Virginia Tech versus North Carolina. Again, another high-scoring game. A lot of high-scoring games today, people. We had Virginia Tech against North Carolina. Number 8, North Carolina beat number 19, Virginia Tech, 56-45. UNC, another high-scoring game. I believe this is the highest-scoring game in ACC history, regular season history. The Tar Heels... Number 19, Virginia Tech scored 20 consecutive points in the third quarter to turn a blowout into a one-possession game, but the Tar Heels stayed grounded. UNC running back Michael Carter and Javonte Williams posted consecutive runs of 18 and 23 yards and set the Heels up on the Tech 12-yard line. Some stats for Virginia Tech. Hooker went 136 yards and 2 touchdowns. Sam Howell went 257 yards for 3 touchdowns. Herbert for Virginia Tech Hokies, 138 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Michael Carter for the UNC Tar Heels went 214 yards with 2 touchdowns as well. Fun fact, I had a professor my junior year of college. I act like that was years ago. It was last year. He was a Virginia Tech Hokie, and I remember every single test or quiz we had in the class, he'd be like, what was my alma mater's mascot? And I was the only one that ever got it right, and he asked every single question. So I felt so proud of myself. Know your teacher's alma mater's mascot is the point of that story, I guess. But the Hokies rallied behind quarterback Hendon Hooker. He was named the starter in August, but was among the first Hokie players to be quarantined by COVID-19. He didn't play in their first 2 games and only appeared in 1 drive during the first half. Virginia Tech coach Justin Fernitz started Hooker in the second half, paid off with a huge third quarter, like I said. Tar Heels held the ball for all of 4 minutes in the third quarter. However, they pulled it off, obviously, as they won. It was a blowout. Matt Brown definitely has more work to do. Their defense gave up 20 consecutive points, like I said, in the third quarter. Got stagnant, a little like Oklahoma there, but another win for UNC, who is number 8 in the polls right now. And with Florida losing today, they're expected to move up at least 1 or 2, I would like to think. Next up on our list of games we have here, people, we have the University of Georgia Bulldogs versus the Tennessee Vols. Vols? Yeah. 44-21 UGA. It was number 3 Georgia, beat number 14 Tennessee. Some stats. We have Guarnantero for Tennessee Vols. He had 215 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Bennett, who continues to impress for the Bulldogs after going back from junior college to being the 3rd-string quarterback on the depth chart, had 238 yards and 2 touchdowns. Milton for UGA added 8 carries for 56 yards, and Gray added 8 carries for 25 yards for the Vols. Palmer added 71 yards and 2 touchdown receptions in the air for Tennessee, while Jackson added 91 yards and 1 touchdown. It started out as a very even battle. Tennessee had a goal line stand at the end of the second half, which you'd think would give them momentum in the sense of like going into the second half, but they didn't score in the second half, in all honesty. It was all Georgia from there. I guess Georgia took their goal line stand at the 2-yard line as revenge. But Georgia's biggest opponent was probably Georgia. They got loose in the first half. Everyone was expecting Georgia to win in this game. It was a home game for Georgia. They trailed 21-17 at halftime. It made all the necessary adjustments and outscored the Volunteers 21-7 over the final 30 minutes. Things started poorly for the Bulldogs when a bad snap on the opening possession of the game sailed over quarterback Stenson Bennett's head and did not stop rolling until it had traveled 25 yards to the goal line. It was the kind of break that Tennessee would need to pull off an upset, but it wasn't the last break they would get. Twice the Bulldogs were stuffed on 4th and 1, including the goal line just before halftime. Like I said, one led to a touchdown, and the Vols actually led the game at 21-7 at halftime. The second half started, and Tennessee's luck ran out. Georgia held Tennessee to 143 yards of offense in the first half, and it had not been for the bad snap and Tennessee's big defensive stops, the Vols likely would have been out of the game early. Instead, Georgia won comfortably. Even if this game does not reflect the blowout score, it seems a lot closer than it was, but it definitely was a blowout. By the second half, I was hoping Tennessee could make it a game, but it really wasn't. I kind of switched over to get ready for the Clemson-Miami game, to say the least. It was a good game, though. I think the biggest thing we learned is that Bennett is a real contender, and I don't think we'll be seeing JT Daniels play anytime soon unless Bennett gets injured or something. Obviously, with Newman out and the true freshman quarterback struggling a little bit, I think it's Bennett's year to shine, and who knows, we could have another Joe Burrow on our hands with this kid. I'm curious to see what his odds are. I will look that up for Thursday's podcast. Next up, we have Iowa State versus Texas Tech. Another, not a close game. I feel like the first few matchups we had were very close, and now we're kind of getting through the middle ones, I guess you could say. But 24 Iowa State beat Texas Tech, another Big 12 rival. Not rival, but another team, 31-15. Would you guys say, by the way, that if they're in your division, they're considered your rival? Like, I always think that Colorado was rivals with USC, and one of my friends was like, they're not rivals. I was like, well, we're in the same division, and we always play each other really tough, and it's always, I feel like when you're in the same conference, and, like, especially division, it's always harder, you know? They're always gonna be your rival, but you know, it is what it is. That's just my thought. But for Texas Tech, Colby went 115 yards, 1 touchdown through the air. Purdy for the Iowa State Cyclones added 302 yards and 2 touchdowns in the air. White had 7 carries for 21 yards for Texas Tech. Will Hall had 135 yards and 2 touchdowns for Iowa State. Iowa State is heading to its bye week on a high. The 24th ranked Cyclones had a dominant performance on Saturday to blow out Texas Tech 31-15 at Jack Trace Stadium. They are now 3-1 overall after getting upset week 1 against Louisiana Lafayette, and they're a perfect 3-0 in the Big 12. The Cyclones are off next week before they faced 10th ranked and undefeated Oklahoma State in Stillwater, Oklahoma. So big things we learn. They did what we didn't hadn't been accomplished in 6 years last week when they knocked off Oklahoma at Ames. And it would be critical for them to back that up with another victory to prove they are legit and not just a one-hit wonder. They made a statement in the process. I mean, any sort of win is good, but considering they outclassed Texas Tech and Texas and Oklahoma, wow, one of them won today. They're not looking like the most polished teams in the world. The Cyclones definitely have a chance to be contenders for the Big 12. Beating Oklahoma was no fluke. This team is for real. That's very clear. There still was some sloppiness, though, even if they played well. They had a blocked field goal that returned from a touchdown on Iowa State's opening drive that gave Texas Tech its only points until the fourth quarter. It was the third special teams touchdown surrendered by Iowa State this season after Louisiana Lafayette returned 2 kicks for scores in Iowa State's opener, if you guys remember that. Special teams looks like their biggest vulnerability, I have to say. The bye week will be good for them to fix that up. They also committed 6 penalties for 40 yards. Safety Ashim Young was ejected for targeting in the fourth quarter. The offense looked amazing, though. The Cyclones put up over 500 yards of total offense, with quarterback Brock Purdy going 32 of 43 for 302 yards. The Cyclones are utilizing all their weapons, and their offense is a tough cover. All right, next up on our list, we have an upset. Another upset. I wish I could put a sound effect, and I'll talk to my boss about that. Like a bow, 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 bow. My dog's looking at me like I'm crazy or something. She probably thinks she's like a wolf because it's all dark out and stuff. But I have my candle on, so it's not dark. I am that crazy dog lady. I think it's kind of funny. But anyways, next up we have Missouri LSU. I've talked about this, but I almost went to Mizzou. I'm very proud of the fact I almost went to Mizzou. I like to consider myself somewhat of a Mizzou fan, even though they've not been the best this year. However, they've held their part in their games since they upset LSU today. LSU is now, they upset LSU today 45-41. The absence of Heisman winner trophy winning quarterback Joe Burrow has been the biggest individual loss of defending champions. His replacement, Bo Pelini, just really doesn't do it. Miles Brennan had to step in. They stunned number 45-41 in Columbia on Saturday afternoon in a game that was moved from Baton Rouge to Columbia to the arrival of Hurricane Delta. The score didn't indicate just how awful LSU's defense was, as it was the case in the season opener loss to Mississippi State. LSU opened the season at 1-2 for the first time since 1994. Missouri quarterback Connor Bilecik, in his first career start, he completed 29 of 34 passes for 406 yards. Miles Brennan for the LSU Tigers had 430 yards with 4 touchdowns. Other than that, Marshall for LSU had 235 yards and 3 touchdown catches, and Dove for the Missouri Tigers had 38 yards and 1 touchdown. The rushing defense, LSU doesn't have that either. Missouri racked up 191 sack-adjusted rushing yards, and Larry Ratune added 18 carries for 199 yards. Missouri coach Eli Durkowicz scheme has ball carriers running virtually free all game long. Sure, they can make the argument that having only 2 returning starters hindered the progression of the once proud Tigers, but there was no effort for Missouri and Mississippi State receivers running free. There's no excuse for a lack of effort. That's very clear. They looked tired. They looked like they didn't want to be there. I'm sure having to move the game because of a hurricane is stressful, but they didn't look like they want to be there. At this point, the Tigers should be concerned with finishing over 500. I mean, losing to Missouri is never something that teams want to do right now. Missouri and Arkansas, as we'll get to later, but maybe not Arkansas this season, you know? They're kind of showing that maybe the season's not lost, obviously. You never want to say that, but it doesn't look like they will be the contenders that we potentially thought they were, especially when they had to put Miles Brennan back in, who has performed okay in the loss of Joe Burrow. But yeah, that was probably, actually, that was the biggest upset of the day, because A&M was ranked and Missouri wasn't, and everyone was surprised by that. I mean, everyone and their mother. My dad was surprised. My dad doesn't watch college football, and he was like, Missouri won today? Like, I remember when I was choosing colleges, you guys, it's sad, and I don't know if it's sad, but as you guys know, I love college football, obviously, based on the fact that I'm doing a college football podcast as my internship, and I freaking love it. I'm so, so grateful. I brag about my internship every single day to my friends whenever they ask. I love it so much. Anyways, that's besides the point, but when I was picking my colleges, I went to a really small private school, so I only picked schools that were, like, big football schools, and I applied to Missouri because they have, like, the best journalism program. And I remember my dad sat me down, and I was between, like, Alabama and Missouri for, like, the southern school I was considering. I go to Boulder. Like, my parents were like, Danielle, you're from San Diego. You're not going to do too hot in the South when you've never lived in the South. Like, you've lived in Connecticut and San Diego, like, 2 very different places from the South. But they sat me down, and they're like, okay, Missouri's not good at football. Like, are you sure? And it was funny because my dad was trying to get, like, go to Alabama, like, go for the football. And my mom was like, honey, consider your academics. But I thought that was funny. And then my mom was just like, they stink, Chip. Like, it's fine. But I thought that was funny. But, yeah, Missouri, biggest upset of the day. Ed Orgeron was clearly very upset after the game. In a few press conferences, he was disappointed. I mean, there's no excuse for the lack of effort that the LSU Tigers had in their game today. And in the past few games, I don't think the Mississippi State game was a fluke by any means. Just because they won last week does not mean that this team is back to normal, obviously. And I think the loss of Joe Burrow is hitting the team a lot harder than they expected it to. And next up, we have a few more games to get through, people. But next up, we have Ole Miss, Alabama. This was the game of the night, people. Not Clemson, Miami, like we all thought. I feel like it's always so funny whenever there's a Clemson game on national television. Very rarely is it, like, as close as people want it to be. And it was number 7 Miami, and Clemson just threw them out of the park. But we have Ole Miss versus number 2 Alabama, which was 63-48 Alabama. Very close game, back and forth for literally all the game. They just kept exchanging touchdowns, touchdown to touchdown to touchdown, and then Ole Miss scored 2 field goals, and Alabama scored a field goal and a touchdown to secure the victory, essentially. The game leaders for this on the Alabama Crimson Tide side, Mac Jones had 417 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's solidifying that they're Tua Tagovailoa, not as missed as people thought he would be. Carroll for the Ole Miss Rebels had 379 yards and 2 touchdowns. Connor for Mississippi State Rebels had 128 yards and 2 touchdowns, while Najee Harris had 206 yards and 5 touchdowns. We'll get to that. And then Devontae Smith for Alabama had 164 yards and 1 touchdown, while Yobith had 181 yards and 2 touchdowns. I'm so sorry if I mispronounced your name. This was an incredibly exciting game. Back and forth the whole game. It was Nick Saban versus his old offensive coordinator, Lane Kiffin. You know how Saban is when it comes to old offensive coordinators. Kind of like Bill Belichick in a way. I mean, kind of from the same tree, I guess you could say. But my gosh, Lane Kiffin was giving Nick Saban a run for his money. As much as you might hate Lane Kiffin, like, amazing play calling this game. I think the turning point of the game, though, was when they had an onside kick that went Alabama's way. After, it looked like Ole Miss was going to get the ball. But this was a very exciting game, probably back and forth. It was definitely my favorite game of the weekend because it was so unexpected. I kind of knew the Texas-Oklahoma game was going to be good, was going to be anticipated. But, oh, my gosh, people. This was an offensive battle and definitely one of Alabama's more high-scoring games of the year. And in general, I feel like I never really see Alabama as a high-scoring team. But then again, like every year they have a first-one wide receiver, like Smith this year. So I'm like, okay. I don't know why I think that. I always just think of SEC and think defense, but it's like Alabama keeps churning out these wide receivers. And then Najee Harris, my gosh, you guys. Najee Harris, he's back from injury. He's better than ever. He's probably, him and Travis Etienne are the two running backs to look out for on the Heisman list this season. My gosh, he dominated in the trenches today, people. 5 touchdowns. I mean, you can't say anything else than that. He dominated. And this was not a very defensive game. Both defenses did not do too hot. Obviously, neither quarterback had an interception, but probably my favorite game of the weekend. Next up, we have 3 more games to get through. I guess. We have Clemson, Miami. Number 1, Clemson versus number 7, Miami. This was the game we were all excited for the whole day. I was like, oh, Clemson, Miami's on shine. I'm so excited. Yeah, I turned it off after the second quarter, guys. At halftime, I was like, no, I'm putting on the Alabama game. I'm sorry. The perks of cable, people. Let me tell you one thing about living at home with your parents when you weren't expecting it is have cable, people. Cable... I hate that people underrate cable nowadays. I love watching SportsCenter in the morning, and I love having the news. I love cable, people. I'll probably be one of the last people to get rid of cable. That doesn't mean I don't love streaming, but, like, I'm actually writing a whole essay on the sacred power of live when it comes to sports. Anyways, besides the point. The whole day I was like, oh, Clemson, Miami. Yeah, it wasn't that great, people. Anyways, let's unpack it. So, King for Miami, who transferred from the University of Houston and has had great games the first few games of their season. He went 120 yards and 2 interceptions tonight, while Trevor Lawrence, everyone thinks is the number 1 draft pick this season in the NFL draft, in the 2021 NFL draft, as well as probably the Heisman favorite, I would say. He had 292 yards and 3 touchdowns. Travis Etienne had 149 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. King had 84 yards and 1 touchdown on the ground as well. And Brandon Galloway had 74 yards and 2 touchdowns. Not much to say here, honestly. Beginning of the game looked like it could be close, but you know when like you turn on a game and you're like, this ain't it. This ain't it, people. That was kind of the game. Clemson just ran away, 2 touchdowns in a row. It was 14-0 very quickly. Miami got a field goal, but you kind of knew it was over from then. They were running up the score. It also started raining in Death Valley, and by the end of the game, there was no doubt in my mind. The final score, like I said, 42-17 Clemson. I believe Miami only started scoring in the second half, so... Next up, people, we have Notre Dame versus Florida State. Notre Dame was back after a few weeks off. 42-26 was the score for Notre Dame. The Fighting Irish, number 5 Fighting Irish, stayed undefeated against the Florida State Seminoles, who struggling is an understatement when it comes to their team. No hate to the Florida State Seminoles, but yeah. He didn't put up ceiling passing numbers. Ian Brock, he had 201 yards or completions on 16 completions with 2 touchdowns, while Travis, for Florida State, had 204 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Travis also added 96 yards and 1 touchdown on the ground, while Williams added 185 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground for the Fighting Irish. Ian Brock is now 23-3 as a starter. The last time he didn't open a game as a starter was the 2018 home final against Florida State. Book's late first half touchdown to Brendan Lazy tied the game for a third in program history. Notre Dame, it was a sloppy win to say the least. They were a little rusty. They looked like they hadn't played in almost a month, which they hadn't. They've had a few games canceled to COVID, I believe, and time off to their schedule. But it was no doubt Florida State was going to run away with this. I actually had a friend that was at this game, and she said it was interesting. She said everyone was wearing masks. She felt very safe, which was good. It was good to see Notre Dame stay with Williams, even after the fumble and after the big runs he had. Williams ran for 200 career yards coming into the game, then tallied 185 on Saturday. Not a bad night. The 17 points allowed in the first quarter were more than the Irish allowed in each of the first 2 games combined. Notre Dame looked early like a top 5 team, however, and also looked like a team that hadn't played in 3 weeks. Florida State gashed the Irish defense for 142 yards in the opening 15 minutes. The Irish had 7 players out of UCF because of COVID-19, and none in the season opener against Duke. USF, but they had 3 weeks off because of their scheduling. I don't believe there were any games canceled due to COVID. That's my bad. But yeah, Kickoff was also 67 degrees. Kind of a warmer day for Irish, and they had a crowd of 110,409 people. Also, I don't know if anyone watched the Oklahoma-Texas game. I'm sure many of you did, but a lot of crowd there. It didn't really look like there was social distancing, but also, like, I don't know. I think it's hard to be a stickler, and I don't want to be that person. It's like, wear your mask, social distance. Like, obviously, I do want to be that person, but at the same time, I don't even know what I'm saying. Wear your mask, people. Stay safe. Personally, for me, I would not choose to go to a football game right now. I would choose to stay home and be safe for the health of my family, but obviously, like, I wish people would wear masks and maybe not go to football games. Obviously, they need to make money, but I kind of wish that they just kept it closed and used crowd noise like the NFL does, because honestly, it doesn't feel that different, and I wish people could just stay home and realize that you can watch college football on TV and have the same, obviously not the same effect, but stay home, people. Wear a mask. Don't party in big groups. Yeah, be safe. The pandemic is not over, even if you're bored of it. That's my little pandemic rant of the day. But the last game we're going to go over is Arkansas-Auburn. Yeah, I didn't expect this to be close. When I previewed this, I was like, oh, it's Arkansas. Like, they put up a good fight against Georgia. They upset Mississippi State, 1-1. Like, they look like contenders. No, guys, they came to play this season. Arkansas, along with Mizzou, has kind of been the laughingstock, I guess you could say, of the NFL, college football the last few seasons, and that was not the case today. What the controversy was of this game was the late game call. Auburn had a fumble. They had a backwards pass fumble, and the refs ruled it as an incomplete pass. However, when he spiked the ball, it sure looked like a backward pass fumble. The game is actually on my TV right now. It's on mute. They're doing a replay. But this was a ruling, and at this point, Arkansas was up 28-27 over the Auburn Tigers. Bo Nix didn't field the snap clearly and spiked the ball away facing backwards. The official ruling was an incomplete pass, but Auburn still was allowed to get its 39-yard field goal attempt. They were flagged for intentional grounding, but that didn't really do anything. The SEC later released a statement on the ruling. In essence, it agreed that Nick's spike was a backward pass. However, because Arkansas didn't clearly recover the ball immediately before whistles were blown, the Razorbacks did not end up with the ball. In real time, Arkansas recovered the fumble, but only after the official blew the whistle dead. There's an argument the play could not have been blown dead at all. With the Razorbacks trailing 28-27, Tiger quarterback Bo Nix attempted to spike the ball and run the clock out on a 3rd and 1 at the Arkansas 20, but instead he fumbled the snap. So that was the big controversy. Many think that Arkansas would have won, and that call kind of screwed it up. I mean, karma worked in its favor, but Arkansas came to play today, guys. No one was expecting this outcome. I mean, no one was expecting it to be as close to the game. Auburn has struggled now in 2 straight weeks that they lost to Georgia. Fairly not the best loss, I guess. Is there a good loss? But they got demolished by Georgia last week, and they held it pretty tight to Arkansas, which is an unranked team many don't consider to be the top tier of the SEC. And obviously, Arkansas upset Mississippi State last week, which previously upset LSU, so But that was probably one of the more shocking weeks of college football, you guys. Oh my gosh. Feels crazy. We're in week 7 next week. Oh my gosh. Like, I feel like back in July I started this, and I was like, well, college football even happened, and we're here, and it's going, and Pac-12 is coming back, and Big Ten is coming back, and I'm very excited, everybody. But yes. Whew. Thank you so much for tuning into my instant reactions this week. As always, be sure to subscribe to the GSMC College Football Podcast wherever you get your podcasts, on iTunes, Spotify, etc. Please leave us a review. It really helps us out. If you enjoy the podcast, if you enjoy hearing me talk, my voice, if you enjoy hearing my voice for 30 minutes to an hour and a half sometimes, do you like longer podcasts? Do you like shorter podcasts? Let me know. I really appreciate you guys listening today. Thank you so much for all your support. I'm so happy to be talking about college football with you guys. I love it. I truly adore it so much. It's my favorite thing to do. And with all that being said, you guys, I will talk to you all on Thursday, where we will go over week 7 previews. We'll go over what we learned this week, the AP poll, some news. We'll start previewing the Big Ten because it's coming back soon, baby. But with all that being said, I hope you guys all have a fantastic week, and I will talk to you all on Thursday. Bye, guys.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmc.com. GSMCpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From football to basketball, baseball to MMA, and even soccer. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast.